can't win this fight. Mike Lee can't win this fight. Rand Paul can't win this fight. No politician in Washington can win this fight to defund Obamacare, because there is a bipartisan mess up there that depends on the ever-growing leviathan of government. The only ones who could win this fight are, if we see in the next 2 months hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans going to don'tfundit.com, signing the petition, calling their elected representatives, calling their senators, and saying, stand for principle. Look, the wheels are coming off this. The Teamsters are abandoning it. President Obama just granted all of Congress an exception. And he did it because Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats who passed this thing came begging and said, please, 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 let us out of Obamacare. This thing ain't working, but yet I can't count the number of Republicans in Washington who say, well, we can't defund it. No. We can pass symbolic votes against it, but we can't actually stand up and take a risk and potentially be blamed. This is the most important fight this Congress will face, and the only way we win this fight is if the American people rise up and hold our elected officials accountable. The final thing we need to do is champion opportunity. For a long time, I've advocated what I call opportunity conservatism, that every policy we think about, we talk about, should focus like a laser on opportunity, on easing the means of ascent up the economic ladder, on how it impacts the least well-off among us. You know, the untold truth about the Obama economy is the people who have been hurt the most are the most vulnerable among us. Young people, Hispanics, African Americans, single moms. Because when you pound small businesses with $1.7 trillion in new taxes, with mountains of regulation, it's not the CEOs who lose their job. If you were flying in a private jet 5 years ago, you're still flying in a private jet. It's the people just starting to climb the economic ladder, seeking the American dream. And I think as conservatives, we are and should be the party that champions the little guy, the person working to achieve the American dream. You know, if you think about the best slogan of the last presidential campaign, President Romney's campaign, I think the best slogan was, "You built that." It was a response to President Obama's very, very revealing statement, "You didn't build that. You didn't build that small business." And yet, as good as it was, it could have been much, much better. Because to whom was it directed? It was directed to those who had already built their business, who had already succeeded. How much better would it have been if what we had said was, you can build that? Because what President Obama was saying is, you can't build that. You know, y'all heard from my dad earlier today. 55 years ago, when my dad showed up in Texas, he'd been imprisoned, he'd been tortured, he was 18, and he couldn't speak English. With $100 in his underwear, he washed dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And yet, he had a passion for freedom. He had a passion for the American dream, and working, washing dishes, he paid his way through the University of Texas, he got a job, he built a business, he worked towards the American dream. Now, my dad has been my hero my whole life. But you know what I find most incredible about his story? How commonplace it is. Every one of us here tonight has a story just like that in our background. Whether it's us or our parents or our great-great-grandparents, we are the children of those who risked everything for freedom and opportunity. I think that's the most fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American, and it's why we're going to take our country back. But it's not going to be politicians in Washington who do it. It's going to be the grassroots. It's going to be the American people. And so I need your help. The only way we can do this is to mobilize a grassroots army of millions of Americans who say, get back to the Constitution, get back to our founding principles, get back to the free market system that enables so many millions to start with nothing and achieve anything. And I need your help to tell the story of how freedom works. How many of y'all have cell phones? I ask each of you to take out your cell phone right now. And if you're willing to help tell the story of how freedom works, how it produces opportunity, I ask you to text the word growth to the number 33733. Text the word growth to 33733. Listen, it's one thing if you have a bunch of politicians talking about this. If we have millions of Americans who are reaching out to their friends, their family, their neighbors, and saying, there was a time when every generation was optimistic about the future, about what their kids and grandkids would have. That's the time we've got to get back to. Let me say two things in conclusion. Number one, I am profoundly optimistic. As dire as things are, we've seen things dire before. In the 1970s, we were told malaise, we had to accept second-class citizens. And yet, the Reagan Revolution, led by many of the men and women in this room, turn this country around. We're seeing right now a new generation of leaders who are rising forward, who are defending free market principles and spreading the word, and with a grassroots army, that's how we turn the country around. And what I would say to you finally is President Reagan famously observed that freedom is not passed down in bloodstream. That each generation has to stand up and defend our liberty. And that none of us want to live in a world where one day our grandkids ask us, Grandpa, Grandma, what was it like to live in America when people were free? That's why y'all are here. That's what we're fighting for, is because we want a brighter tomorrow, and I am convinced as we continue rising together that we are going to pull back from the brink, pull back from the cliff, and we are together going to restore that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.